The parking lot outside Greystone Veterinary Clinic was nearly empty when Natalie Webb clocked out at 10:30 p.m. A single security light hummed above her Honda Civic. The clinic had been open since 6 that morning. A golden retriever named Chester had come in at 7 with a swollen abdomen, and by 9 he was on the operating table, and by 11 he was gone. The anesthesia and the surgery taking him faster than anyone expected. Natalie had held him in the aftermath, still warm, his eyes half closed, while the vet finished her notes in the hallway. She had cried a little. She always did with the animals. It was why she had gotten into this work in the first place, 15 years ago, because she could not save them all, but she could be there when they went. She sat in the car for a while. The parking lot was gravel, and the light above it attracted moths, small ones, circling in tight spirals that never seemed to end. She thought about Dana Mrdered, who would be asleep by now in the apartment on Wyndham Circle, who had texted her that afternoon about the electric bill and whether they should switch providers. A mundane question from a mundane day that would become, by morning, the last ordinary exchange between them. Natalie drove home, 7 miles through Columbus, past the grocery store on Broad Street where she and Dana used to argue about which checkout line was faster, past the gas station on 4th where Dana always filled her Subaru before it was paid off, past the Wendy's near the complex where they stopped on bad days when neither of them wanted to cook, and sat in the plastic booth and complained about work. She pulled into the lot at Wyndham Circle at 10:47 p.m. She parked in her space, spot 14, the one nearest the stairwell. She gathered her bag from the passenger seat. She looked up at the building, 3rd floor, left side. The window for the living room and the smaller one for Dana's bedroom. Both dark, normal. Dana went to bed early. She said her billing job was easier if she started at 6 a.m., and starting at 6 meant sleep by 10, and asleep by 10 meant reading glasses on the nightstand and the white noise machine humming in the corner and the door locked from the inside. Natalie climbed the stairs. She always took the stairs. Her knees had started bothering her in the last year, the left one especially, and the elevator was faster, but it was a small metal box that smelled like cleaning solution, and her own reflection stared back from the brushed steel doors, and she could not stand it, the way she looked in those reflections, tired in a way she did not want to acknowledge. She reached the 3rd floor landing and stopped. The door to 3B was open, not wide open, just a crack. An inch of black space between the frame and the door, the deadbolt visible in the gap, still engaged on the inside. Natalie did not touch the door. She did not push it open. She stood very still on the landing, her bag over her shoulder, her keys still in her hand, and she listened. The apartment was silent, not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that is not absence of sound, but presence of something wrong. She stepped back, looked at the door again, looked at the hallway behind her, the carpet, the emergency exit sign at the far end, the neighbor's welcome mat with the cartoon cat on it that Dana had said was tacky. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her phone. She called 911. The dispatcher was a woman with a calm voice who asked Natalie to confirm the address and whether she could see anyone inside. Natalie said she could not see anyone. She had not looked. She did not want to look. She said the door was always locked. She locked it herself that morning before she left for work. She was sure of it. The dispatcher told her to stay where she was. Officers were on the way. Do not go inside. Natalie said she would wait. She sat down on the hallway floor with her back against the wall and her bag in her lap. She pulled her knees up. She could hear the building's central air cycling on, a low mechanical drone that she had never noticed before in 2 years of living there. She could smell, faintly, something chemical, bleach maybe, or cleaning solution, something sharp and artificial that did not belong in the hallway. 6 minutes later, 2 Columbus police officers arrived. They were young, one of them barely older than Dana, and they pushed the door open with their shoulders and swept the apartment room by room with their flashlights and their service weapons drawn. Natalie stayed on the floor. 3 minutes after that, one of the officers came back to the hallway. He was pale. He called for detectives. Then he called for the coroner. Natalie understood what that meant. In the living room, Dana Mrdered lay face up on the carpet. A pool of dark blood had spread beneath her head and begun to dry at the edges, the liquid portion evaporating into the apartment's recycled air, while the solids remained, a dark oxidized halo around her face. Her eyes were open. Her hands were at her sides, palms up. There were lacerations across both palms, cuts that had bled freely and whose blood had dried in rust-colored streaks down to her wrist. She was 32 years old. She was 5'4". She weighed 118 pounds. She worked from home doing medical billing for 3 practices in the Columbus area, a job she had gotten after her previous employer laid off half its staff in a restructuring. She had no criminal record, no known enemies. She had been home alone, apparently asleep, when someone entered the apartment through the kitchen window. The screen had been cut from the outside, the window pried open. A hammer from the kitchen junk drawer had been used as the weapon. The attacker had struck Dana at least 4 times in the head while she was lying down. She had defensive wounds on her hands, the lacerations, which meant she had been awake. She had fought back. She had tried to block the blows. Her fingernails had broken during the struggle, some of them torn down to the quick. There was no sign of forced entry through the front door. The lock was intact, the deadbolt still engaged from the inside. Whoever had done this had entered through the window and exited the same way, or through the front door after ensuring the building was empty. Jewelry was missing from the bedroom, a gold chain that Dana's grandmother had given her, a watch Natalie had seen her wear on special occasions. Cash was gone from Dana's wallet, which was found on the kitchen counter with the credit card still inside. It looked at first like a burglary gone wrong. If this kind of story stays with you, subscribe. There is more where this came from. Detective Carla Reyes arrived at 11:38 p.m. She had been home for 20 minutes, sitting at her kitchen table, eating leftover pad thai from a container and watching the second period of a Blue Jackets game on her phone. When her phone rang, she read the message twice and stood up immediately. She drove to Wyndham Circle with the seat warmers on because the April night was cool and damp and her lower back had been bothering her for 3 weeks. Dana Mrdered was on the floor. Reyes crouched beside her and looked at her face. The wounds were significant. The blood had pooled and then stopped, which told her Dana had died quickly. The defensive wounds were interesting. They told a story. Dana had been awake. Dana had seen the attacker. Dana had raised her hands to protect her face and taken cuts on her palms for her trouble. Dana had fought, even if the fight had been brief and hopeless. Reyes stood up. She walked the apartment slowly. She looked at the kitchen window, pried open from the outside, the frame scratched and splintered. She looked at the living room, the position of the body, the pattern of the blood, the way Dana's reading glasses had fallen on the carpet 3 feet from her head, knocked off in the attack or perhaps knocked off when she fell. She looked at the hallway leading to the 2 bedrooms, the bathroom, the front door still hanging open. She noted the front door was open now, but the deadbolt was engaged from the inside. That meant the door had been opened from the inside at some point. Either Dana had opened it for someone she knew, or the attacker had opened it from the inside to leave and pulled it shut behind them. The door would have locked automatically when it closed because the lock was spring-loaded. That was a detail. Details were everything. Reyes went to the hallway. A woman was sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. She was in her early 30s, maybe 34, wearing jeans and a gray sweatshirt with the Greystone Veterinary Clinic logo on the chest. Her eyes were red but dry. She was holding a bag in her lap like it was something important. Reyes sat down next to her, showed her badge, asked her name. The woman said, Natalie Webb. She was Dana's roommate. Reyes asked her to walk through the evening step by step. Natalie did, calmly, methodically. She had come home from work, found the door open, did not go inside, called 911, waited on the landing, heard the officers arrive, heard them enter the apartment, heard, eventually, one of them call for detectives. She had been on her shift since 6 that morning, 12 hours. She worked at Greystone Veterinary Clinic on the west side. Her manager could confirm. She had not seen Dana since that morning, when Dana was making coffee in the kitchen and complaining about a billing error at one of her clients' offices. Reyes asked about Dana's relationships. Any enemies, boyfriends, arguments with neighbors, with co-workers, with anyone. Natalie said Dana had been dating someone, Kevin Briggs. They had been together for about a year and had broken up 4 months ago. It had not ended well. Kevin had showed up at the apartment once, about 6 weeks after the breakup, pounding on the door, screaming Dana's name. Dana had called the police. Kevin had been asked to leave and had not come back. Kevin Briggs. That was a name. Reyes wrote it down. She asked Natalie if she would come to the station the next morning to give a formal statement. Natalie said of course. She wanted to help. She wanted this solved. She said it with an urgency that was, Reyes would later note in her report, notable. The next 3 weeks were a study in misdirection, patience, and the peculiar way a murder investigation unfolds when the person at the center of it is also the person who committed it. Natalie Webb arrived at the Columbus Police 2nd District Station at 9:14 a.m. on a Thursday. She wore jeans and a plain gray sweatshirt, no makeup. She had dark circles under her eyes that looked, to Reyes, like genuine exhaustion. She looked like someone who had not slept. She looked, in other words, like a woman whose roommate had been murdered. She gave a statement that lasted 2 hours. She told them about Dana, how they had met on a roommate matching app 22 months before, how they had started as strangers and become something close to friends, how they had a system for groceries and bills that worked well for the first year and then started to fray. Dana had gotten sloppy with rent once or twice, not maliciously, just forgetfully, the way people forget when they are distracted by other things. They had talked about it. It was fine. They had agreed Dana would set up autopay so it would not happen again. Natalie was not accusatory when she said it. She was careful, measured. She was the last person you would look at twice. She said, I think you should talk to Kevin. I think he might know something. She said, Dana never really got over what he did to her. She just got quieter about it. Reyes ran Kevin Briggs. He had 2 prior domestic violence charges, one dismissed, one reduced to disorderly conduct in a plea deal that Reyes had seen 100 times before. He worked construction. He had an alibi for the night in question. He was at a bar on the east side called the Lamplighter, documented by 4 witnesses and a tab receipt showing he had been there until midnight. His DNA was collected. It was run against the partial profile from under Dana's fingernails. It did not match, but Reyes ran it again anyway, just in case. Just to be thorough. A detective who does not follow the obvious is a detective who misses something. A detective who follows only the obvious is a detective who is being managed. That discrepancy was noted. Reyes held it. She did not confront Natalie with it yet. In an investigation, you hold the card that matters until the moment it matters most. Natalie gave a DNA sample voluntarily. She signed the consent form without hesitation. She asked Reyes when she would know something. She asked how she could help. She asked whether there was anything else she could do. She came to the funeral. She sat in the second row and cried quietly, her hands clasped in her lap, and she held Dana's mother's hand during the eulogy. She did not speak at the podium, but she stood at the back of the room during the reception and accepted condolences from Dana's colleagues and distant relatives, nodding at each one. Accepting hugs she did not seem to want, answering the same questions. Yes, she found her. Yes, she called right away. Yes, she is cooperating fully. Yes, she wants them to find who did this as badly as anyone. She organized a small gathering at the apartment afterward for Dana's closest friends. She made sure there was food and drinks. She made sure everyone had a place to sit and talk about who Dana was when she was alive, not just who she had become in death. She collected Dana's things from her bedroom, carefully, methodically, boxing them up while the others told stories and laughed and cried around the kitchen table. The local news covered the case as a break-in homicide. The precinct's community affairs officer gave a statement asking anyone with information to come forward. Tips came in. 17 calls in the first week, none of them useful. Kevin Briggs was publicly named as a person of interest and received a lawyer who issued a statement denying any involvement. Through all of it, Natalie Webb stayed close to the investigation. She called Reyes every few days with what she called new thoughts. Maybe check Kevin's co-workers. Someone might have seen him near the building. Maybe the bar had outside cameras. Maybe the jewelry store on High Street had surveillance footage from the afternoon before. She was not demanding. She was not intrusive. She was helpful. She was invested. She was the last person you would suspect. Reyes, who had seen hundreds of people help with investigations, found herself grateful for it. Most people recoil. They do not want to be involved. They do not want to answer questions. They change their phone numbers and move cities and do not look back. Natalie Webb leaned in. Reyes should have found that suspicious. She would think about that later. The call came on a Tuesday, 22 days after Dana Mrdered was found dead in her living room on Wyndham Circle. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation had completed its DNA analysis. The partial profile recovered from under Dana's fingernails was male. It did not match Kevin Briggs. It did not match any profile in CODIS, the National DNA Database, which meant whoever had left it had no prior felony convictions involving biological evidence. But it did match a reference sample already in the system, Natalie Webb's reference sample. Not a full match. The profile was partial, degraded, scraps of male DNA that had been left behind in the struggle under Dana's fingernails. Genetic material that had survived because it had been protected under nail beds, shielded from exposure and degradation. But the analysis was clear. The unknown male profile and Natalie Webb's reference sample shared enough genetic markers to indicate a familial relationship, parent, child, or sibling. Natalie Webb did not have a brother. She had told Reyes that herself in the very first interview. She was an only child. Her parents were deceased. She had no close relatives in Ohio. Reyes sat in her car in the precinct parking lot and read the report 3 times. Then she called her partner, Detective Marcus Doyle. Something was wrong. They pulled the building security footage from the night of the murder again. The timestamp was clear and authenticated. Natalie Webb entered the lobby at 10:48 p.m. She did not arrive at 11:15 as she had stated in her initial statement and in her formal interview. She had lied about the time she got home. She had lied by 27 minutes. They pulled the time card from Greystone Veterinary Clinic. Natalie had clocked out at 10:30 p.m., 17 minutes before the time she claimed to have arrived at the apartment. She had lied about when her shift ended. These were not minor discrepancies. These were discrepancies that placed Natalie at the scene 20 minutes earlier than she had admitted. 20 minutes that could have been, and according to the forensic reconstruction, was the exact window in which Dana Mrdered was killed. They obtained a warrant for her vehicle. In the trunk, forensic teams found a claw hammer with fresh wood stain on the handle, stain that had been applied recently, within days, and that did not match any renovation work Natalie had reported having done. Caught in the hammer's grip, embedded in the dried adhesive residue, were synthetic carpet fibers. The fibers were examined under microscopy and compared against carpet samples from Dana Mrdered's living room. They matched exactly. Reyes and Doyle drove to the apartment complex on Wyndham Circle together. They parked in the lot below, spot 14, Natalie's space. They took the stairs to the 3rd floor. They found Natalie sitting on the hallway floor on the landing outside 3B, exactly where she had sat the night of the murder. She was looking at the door of her own apartment. Reyes sat down next to her. She did not draw her weapon. She did not call for backup. She was not afraid of Natalie Webb. She said quietly, "We got the DNA back." Natalie looked at her. She did not say anything. "It was not Kevin," Reyes said. "The profile under Dana's fingernails was not Kevin's. It matched something in our system. It matched you." A long pause. Natalie looked down at her hands. She said she was going to leave. She had found a new apartment. She had signed a lease. She was going to tell me next week. Reyes waited. I could not make the rent without her, Natalie said. The policy was for $40,000. She did not know about the policy. Nobody knew about the policy. She looked at Reyes. Her eyes were dry. She did not cry. She did not apologize. She did not explain. She said, I did what I had to do. I need you to understand that. I did what I had to do, and I would do it again. Reyes placed Natalie Webb under arrest for the murder of Dana Mrdered in the first degree. She read her rights. She guided her down the stairs and out to the patrol car that was waiting in the lot below. The neighbors were watching from doorways and windows. One of them was filming on a phone. The lamplighter bar was visible in the distance, its neon sign reflecting orange on the wet asphalt. Natalie Webb did not look at any of them. She looked straight ahead, at the parking lot, at the street, at the ordinary Tuesday night that was unfolding exactly as Tuesdays do in Columbus, Ohio, with traffic and noise and people who had no idea what had happened in apartment 3B and who would learn about it tomorrow on the news and then forget it by the weekend. The trial lasted 9 days. The jury did not believe it. On the 6th day of deliberations, they returned a verdict, guilty of murder in the first degree. When the judge read the sentence, Natalie Webb stood with her hands clasped in front of her. She wore a gray blazer. Her hair was pulled back. She looked to some in the courtroom like someone who worked with animals and might have been kind. She received 25 years to life, with the possibility of parole after 15 years served. She was 41 years old. She would be 56 before she could ask a parole board to hear her name again. Dana Mrederd's mother sat in the gallery. She had not cried during the verdict. She did not cry during the sentence. When the judge finished speaking, she stood up, collected her purse, and walked out of the courtroom without looking back at Natalie Webb. She wrote, "She helped us for 3 weeks. She sat in our station and gave us Kevin Briggs as a suspect. She sat in the front row at the funeral and held the mother's hand. She organized the gathering at the apartment. She managed every moment of this investigation like a project. She was not panicking. She was not spiraling. She was managing it." And then, below that, in smaller letters, "That is the part I cannot stop thinking about. That was the part that stayed. That was the part that always stayed." At what point did you suspect her? Drop it in the comments.